cloud.
The cloud.
To the
Okay,
cloud.
let's try that again. Welcome everybody to the Kubernetes Steering Committee meeting for the month of March. I am your bosun, Aaron Kirkenberger. We are all being recorded right now, and this meeting will be posted to YouTube later. So you can all see yourselves adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct, essentially by not being a jerk and being your very best self. So what I was going to do today was run through everything that we have listed in the topics section for our meeting, and see if we have any time left over. If folks have anything they'd like to add to the agenda, they are free to do so. And with that, I'm going to call on Nikita to talk to us a little bit about the Contributor Bill of Rights issue. I'll go ahead and share my screen while I'm doing this too. Nikita,
yeah, I think Remy can give more context on that because they were the one who created the issue.
Yeah, indeed. So basically, the goal that I was trying to perform here is to be very straightforward and clear with newcomers inside the Kubernetes community, and in particular the ones that want to contribute, to know what they can expect in terms of behavior from the approvers and the reviewer of their issue. When you are a new contributor in Kubernetes and you want to contribute, for instance, inside GitHub, you have to sign a CLA. That basically means that you are revoking all your rights to the intellectual property of what you are giving away to the Kubernetes organization. And I would like to be more specific, and this is not inside either the code of conduct or in the CLA, but more specific about what kind of interaction a newcomer can expect from a different actor inside the SIG. We all know that SIG approver and reviewer are very busy, and this proposition doesn't make man-hour appear out of nowhere. But we have to be very straightforward with newcomers that are maybe not experienced in open source, that maybe don't know very much how reviews are coming up, and maybe try to explicitly say when I engage inside the Kubernetes project, and in particular when I want to contribute something, when I'm a contributor, what kind of right can I expect? It's okay to say very little. You have the right to be treated with decency. You have the right to an answer if you post an issue, this kind of thing. I don't ask for having special treatment. I just want it to be very clear when somebody is joining in what they can expect, what kind of rights do they have. And maybe it can be minimal and just restricted to the code of conduct, but maybe it can be bigger than that. And if in case they don't have any particular treatment, as it's the case in numerous open source projects, maybe it would be a good idea to write something in the name of we are doing the best effort that we can. The reviewer are busy. Please be patient, and we will try to review to the best that we can. Something along those lines. But I would like it to be more explicit for contributors that are not experienced in open source contribution. Is it clear? Or,
Yes. That said, so first off, I kind of question, I believe I would look to SIG contributor experience to understand how well documented the existing pull request and review process is laid out. Like, I'm curious what documentation, so what documentation did you try to read to help you answer these questions? But then I think maybe more specifically, I'm curious, like, what was it that happened that caused you to need to go find, you know,
it was more like a general thinking about this. I'm a contributor of the SIG docs, so I contribute mostly to the French localization of the Kubernetes documentation. So this is mostly what I'm working on. But I was trying to think about what are the different rights because when you get inside the community, you have a certain amount of duty. For instance, it's your duty to sign the CLA, it's your duty to do X, Y, and Z. But I was thinking myself, just like you get inside the country, you have a certain amount of duty and a certain amount of rights. And I was just thinking, what are the rights for a contributor?
Okay, Christoph, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, so like one kind of clarifying question based on what you said, Remy, are we looking for, there's two ways to look at the issue kind of like as you've written it right now. It could be read like you're looking for additional things to be done, like additional rights to be conferred to contributors, or it could be just like, I want like a single page document that lists the what to expect.
At the moment, I'm mostly focusing
on the former, if it's the former, that definitely, like, I'd like to highlight what things you'd be asking for there in addition. If it's the latter, if it's just like a simplified document of this, then I would say like, I would suggest that would be just like a contributor experience thing, like going and either collecting together links to those kind of things, or reformatting it like our new contributor documentation in a certain way that maybe addresses some of your concerns. But like, if it's a documentation issue strictly, I'd say like it's a Contrib-X thing. If it's you're looking for specific rights to be conveyed to people, then we should call that out separately.
Nikita, do you have like an output on this?
I kind of agree with Christoph. So I know that we've talked about this privately before, and from what I understood was that it would be nice to have something written down that would make it explicit about how the escalation process works in the community. And yeah, that was kind of like the biggest takeaway that I got from our conversation. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that seems like something we can definitely do on the Contrib-X side. Just write down here is what to expect. But then if I may stir the pot a little bit, we don't have things written down for, one of the things that Tim is mentioning on the issue is like, we are not SIG based, we are owners based, right? But then we don't have written down, do we have written down, here is the expectation for you to be on the owner's file, and here is when we'll take you out of the owner file if you don't respond in the sense that if you're not active in the community for a year, we know several people essentially who have rolled off Kubernetes and are doing other things, right? So how do we clean up those so people don't get pulled into PRs and issues where unassigned to it and assigned it for reviews or for approval? And we have numerous instances for across all SIGs where we don't have an expectation. Here is what you need to sign up for when you get into the owner's file, right? So that is another way of thinking about it too, right?
Yeah, it's a very interesting way. Yeah.
The reason why we are facing this problem right now is not just approvers are busy. It's just that we might not have the set of approvers that we should, approvers and reviewers. And typically this happens when, across the board, this is not just for newcomers. Across the board, we have a huge problem about review time and things like that, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to set the rules for people to engage in the project too, not just what the newcomers can expect.
That's a very interesting point. Yes, indeed. I was mostly thinking about the interaction between the different instances of power. Like the approver got power, the contributor got a little bit less power, and how this interaction of power like interact with each other. And because we are in a community, so there will be power, there will be interactions, there will be, and I would like it to be very clarified from the get-go. And maybe the document that you laid out about the different privileges of the different roles inside the community and the different roles inside the contributor is really maybe a good start about what are the rights and duties that at every level of the community you should have. Yeah, maybe.
And the thing here is we are not trying to make a decision on what to do here. Mm-hmm. This is more like we should write down what we expect. And then at some point in time in the future, when we are all out of this COVID business and whatnot, where we are all under the lots of pressure and things like that, right? So when we are clear and we get to a regular cadence, at that point, we'll figure out how to implement it or enforce it and things like that. At least we can discuss things now to say where we should be, where we could be, and then we can figure out other things later.
Okay.
So I have a question, if that's okay. Is there an open source community you think that is doing this well that you'd want to see modeled? I'm trying to think through like if the Linux community is better at this, or what was the model?
There is different open source communities that I'm acquainted with, and one in particular was the community of the 0MQ project that laid out a process that is called C4. I can send the link in the agenda, but basically it's a very radical way of looking at contribution, is that your code is merged. If it passes the CI, it's merged. No question asked. And then after, the community will like eventually revert your commit eventually. But basically, as soon as you contribute something, it's accepted right away. And the leader of the project used to say, even my daughter can merge stuff. And the point of view is quite radical. So maybe it's not the right fit for Kubernetes, but it's a radical point of view that asserted that as soon as somebody made an effort, an active effort as a human being to come to the project, then it should be welcomed. Of course, after you will look at the code, of course, after you can make different release, of course, after you can revert some commits. But the first step is always to say you're welcome and you're included. I'm not saying that this is the right fit for the Kubernetes project. I'm not saying this is that it should be applied as it, but I'm saying that as an intellectual point of view, it's very interesting to see this radical point of view, and then after to find a more moderate one, but still to keep in mind that when somebody is making the active effort to contribute, it should be welcomed. And even if it's not welcome, at least to be explicit to what to expect. Because as an external,
your contributions oriented around code in this context. Obviously, there's a lot of other ways individuals can contribute to the project outside.
At the moment, my contributions are mostly on the documentation and the French localization, but later on, that could be based on code. But
I'm not saying you individually. I'm just saying your reference to the quote unquote contribution is basically a PR, a commit of some kind, whether that's okay.
Yeah.
There are other communities like Apache do commit then review, right? So individual maintainers can commit the code directly to the repository, and then it gets reverted if there is a problem with it. So there's a spectrum here, and we've always followed the review then commit for a lot of different reasons. So we're not going to legislate that right now, but it would be definitely good to set expectations for ourselves and then see if we hold up to it.
Just quick process. I want to time box us to like 4 more minutes on this to get to the rest of the agenda.
Yeah. So basically, I'm not asking to have extra rights. I'm just want to bootstrap the effort of saying explicitly what a contributor can expect at every level of its engagement with their engagement with the Kubernetes community. So that's what I had in mind. So it can be a very minimal set of rights. It can be just a bare minimum with the code of conduct, but at least it explicitly said something. And then after, if different SIG wants to be to overbid this with saying like we promise that we will answer you in less than 2 weeks for an issue or something like that, they are free to do so. But I want to lay the bare minimum of what a contributor can expect in all different SIG of the Kubernetes community.
So can we say that SIG contribex can help draft what reflects the current reality and start from there?
Yeah.
There's already an expectations doc in the contributor guide. It's linked into the agenda. And it does talk about code reviews and expectations for latency. And there's also a linked language for each membership role inside of the community membership doc that says that each role is expected to be responsive to review requests as per those community expectations. So we do have a lot of this. It's just A, not surfaced, and B, not detailed. So I just wanted to say that we have much. We just need to bring it up to modern speed and ship it.
I feel like this is an area where new eyes are extremely valuable. I think I personally am coming at it from the perspective of, I think we have everything you're asking for documented. That's why I and some other people have asked, like, what specific problem are you encountering that you're trying to solve and cannot? That allows us to understand what we don't have documented, but it could be that we do have it all documented. It's just hard to find.
It's hard to
and
find.
We need somebody who has fresh eyes to be able to condense it down. But again, I agree. I think what I'm hearing here is this doesn't sound like it's a steering issue. It sounds like it's a contribex and fidelity of documentation issue.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I will move this into in progress, but I'm going to end up removing contributor or removing steering from this issue. There was something related to this, was to ensure there are odd numbers of voting leaders to ensure that tie decisions are broken. Again, I kind of feel like this is maybe a contribex issue, but just to, I don't know if anybody here wants to share their perspective. I feel like code should not be committed via democracy. Like the existing owner structure that we have lays out the very explicit who does and does not have the authority to say yes or no.
Okay. Okay. So this can be closed if you think it's not relevant.
But again, I want to be clear that we're always interested in understanding, like, what specific interaction or issue did you have or did you encounter that led you to realize, hey, I want to solve like this class of problems, right? So we do want to make sure we are helping community members feel welcomed and able to get their contributions in.
It's for this one, it was mostly thinking in terms of like the hierarchy of decision and structure inside the Kubernetes project, and mostly to think what is the final decision that could happen, what is kind of a supreme decision inside a given contribution. For instance, let's suppose that I want to give a certain PR, a certain issue that is touching a certain aspect of Kubernetes. What is the final core of people that will decide whether or not a given pull request will be merged or a given issue will be worked on or not?
The people in the owner's files. And That's one of those areas where I feel like we try to adhere to our community values by making sure we automate that away instead of over documenting that. So when the bot tells you you need to seek approval from these people in these files, that's where that's coming from.
Okay. And what happens if they disagree with each other?
So I would say, like, culturally, I
Go ahead, Derek.
I don't like promoting a culture where maintainers are like pitted against each other. I think to date, to some of Tim and Daniel's points on the issues, there's in my experience, a majority of the time, a shared understanding or thoughts among the maintainers that they try to reach consensus before merging. I've yet to encounter an issue where it might have appeared as drastic as this note implies. Like, at the end of the day, once the code merges, like, that SIG needs to support it. And oftentimes I think code doesn't get merged because the SIG doesn't yet want to take on the support that comes with that code. And I think that's a fair thing for maintainers to be able to try to have a dialogue. And in general, I'm not aware of a particular SIG where this is an issue. If there is a SIG where it's an issue, maybe that's something that we can work with that SIG.
Okay. So basically you're saying that from empirical experience, consensus is mostly all the time reached. That we don't need to have an odd number of approval and owners, because most of the time, for not say 100% of the time, a consensus is reached among all the parties.
Yeah, and I would say also historically where consensus can't be reached, as a project, we try to identify points of extension to allow someone who felt differently to do their action, right? So like a lot of our dialogue early in the project was around how do I get something core into the project, or how do I get my API concept explored? And then, you know, I think the project's been better by supporting a wide area of extension, whether that's at the API level or at webhooks or that type of thing, that we've been able to overcome any of those gaps. Not to say that we've necessarily overcome all, but I think in general, that's what we've tried to do.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay. Next up, Paris, you were going to talk to us about the contributor Twitter.
Yes, I just wanted to get a vote of confidence from the crew that it's cool that Contributor Experience owns a separate Twitter account from the Kubernetes IO Twitter, and that it's owned and maintained by 3 individuals specifically within the project under the subproject for community management.
Anybody have any objections?
I guess the only question I have is, you know, just to be complete, would be, are there any topics to bear there, or is it specifically around contributor experience? Like, what is the charter for the Twitter account?
So we have a marketing charter. We also have social media guidelines. I can bring those up. Hold on one sec. And then we also have themes, and where we will have stuff that is do not post as well. But this is everything contributors. This would not be anything end user, consumer, cloud, anything that would show up on a Kubernetes IO Twitter account that's not focused solely on the contributor. So breaking changes to their workflow, SIG profiles, individual profiles, releases, code freeze, everything about you, steering elections, contributor summit, Kate's working group infra updates, KEPs. I could go on. We have 40,000 people here. We're running a small business.
A small one. That's fine. The one question I think I would have is, like, to make sure, one of the problems we've had with Twitter or any PR for that matter is the notion that it can be commercialized and monetized by individual companies.
Yes.
So long as we adhere to, that it's totally contributor based, then
Yes.
I have no qualms.
We also I made sure to include an ethos inside of the marketing charter. I can link to that's actually linked inside of the Zoom link if you want to grab that, Aaron, too. And the ethos specifically calls out that these folks that are on the marketing committee are doing so as individuals and not as representatives of their project, of their companies. And that if we're writing blog posts to duck out if it's like mainly people at your company that you're writing about so that it's not seen as a sales pitch. So we definitely thought about that going into this 100%. The main goal here is to aid the flow of information and to create stories from what you all are doing. And that's it.
Hey, Paris, this is Derek. I had a quick question, if that's okay. The one theme on KEPs, can you clarify if that's KEPs that are under active discussion, might have maybe to the previous topic where there might not be consensus? Like I worry that the Twitter could be used to provide a bully pulpit.
This would be like whatever we decide, like whatever the owners of KEPs decide that needs more feedback or what have you. We're trying to set up a process by which if folks need more feedback on KEPs, they can get more feedback and not get buried in the enhancements folder or any other issues that need larger feedback and larger horns over.
I guess the question I have is that for the KEP author or the KEP reviewer? For example, like if there was a disagreement between the reviewer and the author, could the author...
I mean, I guess that's something we have not thought about any of this. I'll let you know that, Derek. So, I mean, we can either take KEPs totally off. But I think my concern with KEPs is that there's many, many, many that from both author and reviewer request more feedback. And that's really what I was trying to pay attention to from the first jump by putting KEPs on this. It is not intentionally to create every single KEP having a tweet or anything by that means. So, I mean, if we want to take off KEPs, then we'll take off KEPs. This is like initial thoughts.
Can we, let's, just for KEPs, let's do it only when they get approved. Because we've had situations in the recent past where Twitter was used.
So only approved KEPs.
Only approved KEPs, please.
Even if the author or whoever asks for more feedback, or both parties agree for more feedback?
If an author asks, then we should talk to the people who have been assigned as approvers to the KEP. If it's okay.
Okay.
That's the way I would skin the cat.
Okay. We also created a label. This is far in advance, but the label is contributor comm so that people can flag us when they want communications on things. So that's a steering meeting in 30 days.
Okay.
I think that's a good compromise, Dims. But I would, because that seems to avoid this handle being used as a way to advocate for a PEP feature. That might have consensus.
So I'm just trying to give some actual feedback here. It sounds like there are no objections to contributor experience managing a Twitter account aimed at contributors. We do have a request for clarification around how it's used for KEPs, but otherwise I can consider this a binding vote. Okay.
And we will not tweet anything about KEPs in the meantime until we have something more solid. Cool.
Who would like to take on documenting the KEPs thing?
I'm taking it.
Okay.
Yeah.
right, I will open a follow-up issue on clarification of tips for you.
Yep.
Okay, next thing, retire the resource management working group. Derek, I'm glad you're here. You are listed as one of the organizers of the resource management working group. The other is Vish, who already +1'd this. I'm curious if you think it is appropriate to disband this working group.
Yeah, it should be. I'll open the PR to clarify that after the call. No concerns on my part.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Okay. Next up, again, I'm glad you're here, Derek. We need to confirm you have taken the unconscious bias training.
It's a good question. I remember signing up for the test. I don't think I actually finished taking the actual exam, so I'll follow up on that.
Okay. There should be like a certificate thing or something you can use to verify whether you've taken it.
Cool, okay.
All right. Next up, Christoph, do you want to talk about a DigitalOcean account for end-to-end testing? Let's see. Ihor also probably has something to say, but you go first.
Yeah, so I open this issue, just kind of shepherding our request through to steering. The cluster API provider DigitalOcean maintainers are looking for some basically cloud credits for DigitalOcean to be able to run end-to-end testing. We have similar with Google Cloud and AWS. Before we actually get to the point of a funding request, I wanted to explore, like, can we just get cloud credits? Like, DigitalOcean is a CNCF member. It looks like Ihor has said that they don't have an agreement right now, but if we raise a service desk request with kind of like an approximate budget, they can reach out to DigitalOcean and see what they can do there. At this point, I'm just looking for consensus from steering to like move ahead with that and put that request into the CNCF service desk and just keep pushing this one forward. Anybody have any questions or objections to moving this one forward?
Going once, going twice. Okay, no objections. My only maybe point of process question is, should this have come in via an issue in the Kubernetes funding repo? Right. I don't know. I'm not sure if we've done a fantastic job of publicizing it, maybe, but just to put it on the recording, we do have a repo called Kubernetes Funding, where if you want infrastructure, things like that, this is the process you can follow to make sure that it lands on our radar. So if I go through and create a new issue, recurring expense for a one-time fund, this is probably a recurring expense, right? So you would do that, and then you can fill out what you're looking for. And then this is what would cause us to go file a service desk issue.
So do we go straight to service desk issue, or do we want to talk to somebody at DigitalOcean to see if they have a pool that we can borrow from?
We will do it. So please go to the service desk and we'll take care of it.
I'm fine. Like, we've got the ball to go take it to the service desk at this point. But just for anybody who happens to be watching now or in the recording, this is how you could come to us for funding requests.
Right. The only thing that I'm worried here is, like, what would they ask from us in return, if at all, and what it would cost us, not in terms of money, in terms of, expectations from our project.
Speaking about DigitalOcean?
Yeah.
We have to check that. So let's ask and we'll see what's next.
Yeah, we've stayed away from doing sponsored stuff. That's why.
Yeah, sure. Like, we have the good story with the AWS, for example, which is a sponsor for, which has sponsored like all the CNCF projects, and we have a good story with GCP that have donated a few $1 million to with the Kubernetes infrastructure. And so
right.
we also have the backend infrastructure with the same story. So we'll need, as CNCF, we'll just need a formal request from you as the service desk. We'll proceed with the internal negotiations, and I'll update the issues after that. So we'll let you know what do we have with that.
Yeah.
As a plan B, we can also cover that from the from our budget if we'll have the decline from DigitalOcean, but that's a separate question that we'll discuss later.
If it's anything other than here is the credits, go use it, we would like to know.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you.
But definitely we should know the budget that you need, because as far as I remember, the original raiser of this question haven't provided any budget. So we need to understand the budget, and that's it for now.
Understood.
Okay. Next up, I wanted to bring to the steering committee's attention that there is a PR out to create a new working group called API Expression. Is anybody here familiar with this working group?
Not at all.
Okay. I think I'll send out an email to the steering mailing list asking for you to take a look at this. We, as steering, do need to do a simple majority vote, whether or not we approve this. My impression, based on lurking on the SIG architecture mailing list, is this group is more or less a rescoping or superseding of the apply working group. I maybe have some questions about why the apply working group stuff should remain around. There's whatever, avoiding broken links to previously made decisions in that working group. But the idea is this group kind of carries that forward and extends the mission a little bit. So,
can we vote on email, please? Yes,
that's why I'm going to send out an email to call for a vote. Since we're all here, bringing it to your attention. Next up, Paris, you wanted to talk about a community group health check or roll call.
Yes, I did submit a PR, and I think the PR is linked in that issue. Aaron, scroll the mouse like 2 seconds down. Actually, no, it's in the checklist above. There you go. So I did hustle this in before the meeting. It has updates to both policy and procedure. It definitely needs reformatting, but I figured it's definitely also going to have comments from all of you all and changes, so I did not make it as pretty as possible. Knowing that information, this is intended to be the bootstrap document. Obviously, we have a lot of catch up to do with 40 SIGs, working groups, user groups, committees, etc. So I wrote the process for what 2021 and on would look like, with us anticipating that chairs will have to do 2 reports in 10 months, for instance. But the cadence here would ideally be yearly. Taking this from Apache, they have like quarterly for incubating things, and then like twice a year, I believe, for graduated projects, something along those lines. So this is not as intensive as that, but this definitely sets us up with a cadence. And the cadence that I drew out was, submitting reports in the month of January each year by the end of January, and then steering would obviously follow up and do our due diligence in the month of February each year. So obviously nobody's had a chance to review the PR in question, but feel free to work with me async with questions and then possibly vote on this. One of the open-ended questions that I did have on the issue, there are several still, and I'm actually still updating those. But one of the questions is, according to, what's the actual doc called? I think is it our charter? No, it's inside of changes.md in the steering folder. I think this might be a large enough change that we would need to follow a 4-week policy for comments and questions. But I also wanted to hear from you all as to whether this is a large enough change. It's a little bit ambiguous there. So pretty much figuring out, I guess, our governance and decision-making process on this as well at a meta level.
Tim's.
Unless anybody else has something I could speak.
I'm interested in hearing your perspective.
Okay, so one of the things that we are asking for SIG leads to do is something more than that they've done before, and one of the things that is lacking for SIG leads and technical leads is what is a group of people that I can get help from, right? There is no strong definition of this is the list of SIG members. Is it the list of people in the mailing list? Is it the list of people in the owners group? Is it the list of people who show up for the meetings, right? We don't have, there is no sense of, and I consider myself part of SIG node, for example, right? That's because I feel that I am. But then I don't know if Derek thinks the same way or not. So, there is no sense. So Apache, it works because there is a well-defined group of people that maintain a specific project. And one of them is basically leading the project. So the way it works in Apache is, any one of the people in the SIG, the equivalent of SIG, can essentially do this job. It doesn't have to be the lead itself. But here we are tacking on additional work, and that too, some important work about like thinking for the whole year kind of thing, right? Or next 6 months. So I would like to strengthen the definition of what it takes to be part of SIG, especially because we know that, for example, lots of people get happy and they post tweets saying, oh, I'm a member of the Kubernetes org, stuff like that, right? So that gives them a sense of belonging that they are part of the Kubernetes community. Can we do something equivalent for SIGs? So, and then the SIG leads would have the thing to say, okay, these are the set of people I can pull for different roles, for different things. Maybe one of them can help me with taking a turn at writing up all the stuff that is needed for this reporting structure. That was my thought process when I was talking to you about it, Paris.
So we don't think like sub-project owners and mailing list members would necessarily qualify in that definition? Or do you want to see that actually those three things drawn out somewhere? Or, sorry for asking another question, or do you want us to ask the chairs how they are explicitly measuring membership with the report responses?
The other way I would put it is ask the leads what they would like support with from us.
Okay.
Given that we know these kinds of things, there is a huge drain on their time, right?
I definitely I have 3 questions in there actually that are asking leads that question, Dims. So if you want to check those out too. Okay. I have 2 open-ended questions asking for feedback. One particularly on how we can help them, and then another in specific with their membership.
Right. So we need their input more than you need our input, right? That's the way I'm looking at it.
I would kind of reverse some of this. Some of the things that are asked here are, the order of the asks are less supportive and more dictatorial when I read them, because I'm reading it right now while we're doing it. So like, I understand the purpose and the intent, but what is the end game of some of this, and what are we really trying to do? I think we need to make sure that we clarify intent, that the purpose of this is to better serve them right? And to make sure that we are trying to like, how can we help? How can we foster things? How can we help facilitate? How can we help make things better for people that are there? Because the way it reads, this sounds like an obligation.
I also have a lot of other verbiage that I did not include in this PR that is less process, by the way. Like Christoph and a couple other people saw it, but I did not include it in this PR because I just wanted to talk about process. So I have a lot of the why and the fact that we want this to be collaborative, not in this PR.
Christoph.
Because everything I'm looking for, like nowadays, as both a steering member and as a chair, is that as a chair, I look for any help I can get. To be honest, just being like brutally honest, like I need help like all the time, and I've developed a structure to help do that. And even if I can solicit more people to help build that out, even better. But the reality is that every one of the people that are marked as chairs today are in the same struggle, if not worse than my current situation. It's probably worse, to be honest, because at some point I declared bankruptcy a while ago, and I said I'm stepping back from a bunch of things. So yeah, I guarantee you that most people are in this scenario where they are looking for help but don't know how and where and why. So I think intent matters a lot in this document. I think making sure that the purpose and the goal of the document outlines intent before a person even reads further. And then as you read through it, it'll be clear why the intent is there.
Okay, I'll add that stuff.
Christoph, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, like, I think the intent, at least like the last time we talked about this, was twofold. It was both to, hey, what can we do to help? Like, where are the sticking points in your SIG? Do you have any sticking points? Have you thought about what the sticking points are in your SIG? Like encouraging those, because those will allow us to either like connect them with resources. Like steering can't necessarily solve all your problems, but if we know, and if the SIG is aware and we're aware of like where some of those sticky points are, we can connect with resources to help that. But there was also intent as far as like, we need to know that you're alive and we need to know that you're healthy. And that was like the other kind of half of the intent. So having some kind of more, you know, I say the goal would not be dictatorial, but more process-oriented things of just like, hey, are you alive? Are you healthy? Are you meeting? Are you adhering to our, you know, what our expectations are of SIG chairs? And having that part at least, like, even if we keep that part of it very short, but directed at the chairs, that the chairs are responsible for what's going on. And we also don't have a situation where like the SIG is running and the SIG is going, but we don't have, like, there isn't leadership that's bridging that gap between the SIG and what's happening in the SIG with the rest of the project. And that's usually where chairs and stuff come in, is that kind of like process stuff. I'm definitely down for keeping the process questions very short, because again, if we're saying this is a requirement and you have to do this, I don't want this to be like just another drag that, you know, we need to go and chase people because it's going to take them, you know, even an hour to do. Like that to me, like, I don't want to add another hour of work to every SIG chair. But having that balance of like, okay, we do need to know this little process bit to know that you're alive and you're healthy. And then beyond that, hey, here's what we can do. Like, where are the sticking points? Because if you tell us more about what's going on a little bit deeper, then we can maybe help.
Okay. Lots of good discussion. So my question to you, Paris, is what do you see as the next step here?
I will PR in the why and the intent from everything that we've discussed in the last 3 steering meetings that we've talked about this. I already have most of it. I wanted to leave a lot of that out of the community health check since that's the process. I think that that stuff belongs in governance docs, and that's why I wanted to leave that off of this doc for discussion. And once that's done, though, I'm still unclear as to whether or not this is a 4-week change. So I wanted to see if in the next 6 minutes we could figure out what that is, because that I think will help decide my next steps. Once I'm done with all the updates, I'll email steering private. The idea was to try to have 2020 reports in by the end of the month so that we can take the month of May and do follow-ups and things like that where necessary. So I'd really like to get this done within the next week. It's been lingering for about 3 months, so I want to get it in. Concerns with that?
Yeah, if this is the first time we're doing it, if I'm to be perfectly honest, I have a concern about trying to push this and rush this through before end of month. You know, not only do I think we're still in the process of like, hey, we want to review this, and maybe we can do an internal push and steering and say like, hey, okay, we want to at least get our concerns addressed within a week or so. But then after that, we need to get this in front of people and say like, hey, this is a new process, a new thing we're asking of you. If we give folks a little bit broader time, also just the state of the world, wrapping that in, putting something more onto people's plates, I think it's, I don't know. I understand the desire to keep this moving and not wanting it to drag on longer, but I also
I'm
just
fine.
have
You were
concerns
the
about
one that
lumping
made
another thing onto
going fast. Time out. Your comment in the doc was like, how fast can we get this? So I'm extremely okay with bumping this. I feel like a lot of steering committee members on the line right now are really excited about this. So I just want to make sure that like, yeah, the tone here is not me trying to shove this down people's throats. So I just wanted to say that publicly as well. My tone here is this issue's been open for 3 months and we've been having a hard time collaborating on it. So I would like to just get as much as possible in so that we can all agree on something.
Yeah, for me, the thing was more about, okay, we are a resource, you can lean on us, right? And we need to get the word out. That's why I was very excited about setting this up.
I'm not going to put any dates in here then.
Well, so can I make a proposal? I feel like in the event that we need to have a high bandwidth discussion to resolve any remaining unknowns, I would say we aim to like have all the PRs out there and all the steering committee members have reviewed them by our private meeting. And then the goal is to walk out of that private meeting with you sending an email out to start gathering results. And then perhaps we leave that survey window open for a month so that we can discuss during our next private meeting. I'm sensitive to the fact that we're in a very unique time right now, and that it'll probably take people a while to answer this.
And that's why I personally prefer not putting any dates in here.
Yeah.
So I'm just nervous though about not putting dates in. That means that we don't do it. So I think there's two folds here. I put the dates in here and things like that to lead us to a path, not necessarily to push the community to a stringent date that is unreasonable. Right. So,
and I'm fine with that. Like this kind of ties to who's the next bosun. We nominated me as the bosun for this public meeting. I'm happy to continue to be the bosun and for the private meeting, so I can make sure that I can help keep us accountable to actually reviewing that PR and making sure we get this closed out by our private meeting. And then during the private meeting, we can decide who the next person is. I don't know if I'm blowing scope by trying to tie those two things together, but any objections to me being bosun for another 2 weeks? I'm seeing some +1s in chat, so I'm getting, okay. Okay, that's 2 minutes left. Hooray! And I just wanted to reiterate, it's something like, it's important that we acknowledge that we are in kind of a very unique time right now. I know I certainly want to be the very best that I can be and do all the things, but that's not always possible right now. So I will do what I can to hold us accountable, but it's also okay if we're having a difficult time. Yeah. Does anybody have anything else? Okay. Thank you all for your time and attention during this month's Public Steering Committee meeting. I will see you all next month, and I will see some of you in 2 weeks. Happy Monday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.